And we're back. So we got a new compensation valve right here. We're going to be slapping that in this morning. Going to have a rain day today. I woke up and looked at the forecast this morning. They're calling for 4.6 inches of rain today. Flood watch. So it's just going to be a nice, cool, rainy day here in the shed. So at least we're not going to be hot and sweaty, but going to have to watch out for the flooding, I guess. So Joseph's under the tractor right now. We're going to take that load sense line off the compensation valve, pull the fittings and stuff out of that valve that we're going to have to transfer over to this new one, and then we'll swap that valve out real quick. They got 5mm Allen screws. They got paint in them. Of course they do.
Come on.
Gotta love that John Deere paint. Oh yeah. That new Matco 1/4-inch ratchet, long handle's pretty sweet, isn't it?
It's good. It's got a nice crisp trim with the gears and a selector trim.
Yeah, I like it. Got that valve in there. Now we're going to torque those little torque screws to 137 inch-pounds. And then we'll get the T-fitting in the valve and hook the load sense line up. The valve and the fitting and the line, load sense line's all installed, and we're just going to clean it off with some brake clean. And then we'll run it and see where the pressure's at, but we might have to do some adjustments on the new valve. Alright, so we fired the tractor up with the new compensation valve, and the pressure was better. It was at 29.35. Before we were at 28.65. So I went underneath there and adjusted that screw I was trying to move yesterday, and I moved it maybe a 1/4 turn, and I got it to 29.95, which is really close to 3,000. So we've got our pump stall pressure where we want it. Then I went ahead and I changed to the CF port to check the steering relief pressure. Stalled the steering out. We're still at 2,600. That did not change. Also, our standby pressure of the pump, so with nothing engaged, is 540 now. It was 516 yesterday. I would like to see that it be at least 570, so that's got me a little worried about a load sense leak in the system somewhere, but we're going to have to try to get that steering relief pressure up. So whenever we stall the steering and then stall an SCV at the same time, we want to see if our steering relief pressure goes up, which it does not. So that, I don't think there's any problems there. If we had the steering pressure would go up when we stalled an SCV, we would have more than likely a leak in the load sense circuit. So it's kind of confusing because my standby pressure is a little low, but the pressure does not rise when I stall an SCV. So now I think I'm going to try to go in and adjust the steering relief pressure and try to get that to 2750, and then we'll go from there. All right, so now to get started on adjusting the pressure for the priority load sense, we're going to check and see what the pressure is right here, the load sense coming straight into the compensation valve with the steering stalled. All right, 1,000 RPM with the steering stalled. Okay. All right, so that pressure there at the compensation valve, the load sense pressure going into that, was actually in spec at 2410. It's supposed to be 2380 to 2495. So we're technically in spec right there. But what I want to do now is I'm going to take the planter off this tractor and roll it forward, jack it up. I'm going to take the duals off the left-hand side real quick because we need to get in there and start capping off load sense lines. First thing I want to do is I want to cap off the load sense line between the ILS, SCV check valve, and priority valve port to see where our leak is going. So more than likely, there's probably a problem in the steering valve, but I want to go ahead and cap that line off and see what it does to our pressures. But in order to get in there, we got to take the duals off, which is no big deal. We'll have them popped off in about 10 minutes. So let's get that done. Planer's unhooked. We got a jack. Just going to jack this thing up. We'll get these tires just barely off the ground. Whoa. I just want them barely off the ground. All right. Grab these wheel bolts from me. What the heck? Oh, battery's dead. Sweet. All right, resume. Are we still off the ground?
No.
Raise her up just a little bit.
All right.
Okay. All right, so this is a lot cleaner than the last one I dug into. See what the heck we're doing. So we're going to, well, I already capped off this load sense line right here. And then I'm going to recheck the steering pressure right there. That's where I was snapping onto before to check the steering relief pressure. All right, Joseph, let's see what it is. Oh, hold on. We can't do that. All right. Well, I had to move the duals off the front tires real quick. All right, see what the stall pressure is. Still the same. Well, I forgot that this has a high flow pump. If it has a high flow pump, it'll have this line as well. So I kept that off and redid the test, and it's still only 2600 PSI. So capping off the load sense lines didn't change the steering stall pressure right here at this DR. So I went ahead, I'm like, well, can we just adjust the steering pressure up? So back here, right where I got my light pointed, it's too bright. Anyway, right there where my pinky is, there's an adjustment screw. So 3/8 nut and I think a 3/32 Allen. I had Joseph stall the steering and then I adjusted that up to 2750. So now technically we're in spec with the main pump stall at 3000 and the steering stall at 2750. You want to have a 250 PSI difference between the two. So you don't, if the steering stall pressure was too high, you would stall the pump and then your hydraulics out the back would suffer, or vice versa. So we don't want to do that. So you keep it 250 PSI away from each other. The steering stall pressure is 250 less than the main pump stall. So we technically have that. But after I adjusted that to 2750, my standby pressure down here at this DR is now at 525. So that is still low. It's supposed to be 570, but everything works and now we're in specs. So not really sure what we need to do next. So this is the part of my job that can be really difficult. you're trying to duplicate a problem that the customer had during planting. Now planting's done, it's just sitting in the shed. Ever since I've been testing this tractor, I have never had this thing have hard steering. So it makes it hard to figure out if you fix the problem or not, because the steering always works. So the only thing I had to go off of was just chasing pressures. So we have chased the pressures down, and we finally got 3,000 and 2750, but the standby is still low. So is this normal? Is this a problem? It obviously works okay. So I'm trying to figure out if we're going to need to go ahead and replace that valve while we have the duals off. I have a whole priority valve housing with me on the truck. The tractor does have extended power guard warranty, so it would be covered under that, but it's still a lot of work to do, and I'm just not sure about the standby pressure, so I'm going to throw in a DTAC case with Deere, see what they got to say, if there's any more tests that I should do, or if we should replace the valve while we're in there, or if we should just put it back together and send it. So we'll see what they've got to say, and we'll go from there. All right, so this morning I brought a flow rater with me. So we're going to try to simulate a planter running on the hydraulics on this tractor. I want to put a decent load on the hydraulics and just see if it affects our steering any. So we're going to be flow rating the hydraulic pump, and then we'll be monitoring the pressure on the steering stall, and let's just see what it does. So we're going to be monitoring the CF pressure port for our steering stall with electronic gauge. We've got a mechanical gauge on our main pump DR, and then we've got our flow rater on the back. So I'm going to run the hydraulics max flow, and then I'm going to turn the load or the resistance on that flow meter until we get about 2,500 psi on this gauge, and then we'll start steering and just see what happens. Steer back and forth. It's getting warm. All right, so during that test, we ran at 2,500 psi, but I even cranked it up just a little bit more, 2,750. And when we were moving the steering, whenever the tires were turning, it was actually robbing about 6 gallons a minute from the SCVs. And then when you went to stall, then it would the flow would jump back up on the SCVs. So our steering is demanding enough oil. It's actually, you know, robbing 6 gallons a minute from the SCVs, which makes me think there's something wrong inside of the priority valve. So, and the steering never acted up still, even simulating having a heavy load on the tractor. Still not acting up, but I think there's probably something wrong in the priority valve housing. So we're going to go ahead and just swap that out while we got the tires and everything off of this, and then we'll recheck the flow rate and the pressures whenever we're done and just see what happens. But so far, there's really not a problem. We haven't ever tested this tractor in a failed state, right? We haven't been able to duplicate the concern. So, but I want this tractor to be right, and I want to be able to fix everything we possibly can while it's under warranty. So I think there's probably something going on inside this priority valve housing, so we're going to swap that out. All right, so we're going to be swapping out this big valve right here. So a lot of lines to get off of here. So let's get all these lines off and try to get this swapped out. Okay, there it is. There's a lot of lines going to that. So here's the new one. Look how they package this. Pretty nifty, huh? But we've got to transfer all these fittings and sensors and everything over to this one. Alright, got everything swapped over. Just putting some new O-rings on here. It's going to be a chore getting that valve back in there. Kind of fought it coming out. I was catching on everything. Beautiful. Freak. This gosh darn line catches everything. Oh, there. Yeah, that's why I didn't want that O-ring on there. It gets caught on everything. Ow. Finger. Now that stupid line in the way. Whew. Man, it's kind of rough getting back there, and then you don't know if you dropped an O-ring on the back. Should be all right. Should be. Why won't it turn? Why won't you turn now? What are you hitting on? Nothing. That. Give me a bolt. There's your hole. Man, I don't like this. Why won't that go in? Why? Maybe I can get this one. Maybe. Oh, I feel it. There it goes. That one's going. Mercy sakes. That thing's heavy. I hope those O-rings stayed in back there, because it's bolted. No leaks, that's always a plus. Alright, there's our steering stall pressure, right on the money. I'm gonna run the flow rater. We're gonna flow test this and see what it does. Staying pretty steady. Here's our standby pressure. There's our stall pressure. So everything seems to be working perfectly now. I especially like the flow rate not changing as much whenever we're steering the tractor. It stays pretty consistent. Before, it would vary 4 to 7 gallon per minute whenever we were steering the tires. So I like that. Our standby pressures now it's around 545 psi or so, which is still under spec, but is it a problem? I don't know. They check these specifications, brand new tractors at the factory. So, as things wear over time, maybe it's a little different. I wouldn't be able to confirm that pressure unless I checked another tractor identical to this one with about the same amount of hours and it not have a problem. So until we know what that pressure is on another known good tractor, I don't know if we can confirm whether that is good or not. So everything's working perfectly now, in my opinion. The flow rate's good, the steering stall pressure's good, the main pump stall is good, and we actually never even got this thing to act up. We were just chasing pressures, like I said before. So we got that valve replaced. So that's one less thing we got to worry about. If this tractor does act up again later on in the future, we already know that the priority valve housing's been replaced, the compensation valve's been replaced, and it might just need a pump replacement at that. I haven't had to change one of these high flow pumps on this newer 8R tractor before, so I haven't had any issues with the pump itself. So, but I have had issues with the priority valves and seals leaking on the priority valve. The only problem with this one, it doesn't have the cartridge like the old ones do. It has the priority valve is inside of that valve housing and it's non-serviceable. So you just got to change the whole thing. So I'm happy with the tractor. Customer's happy. We're going to go ahead and throw the duals back on and we're going to send it. And done. So this tractor is now complete. It is done. We're going to have the customer hook it back up to the planter and he's going to clean his planter out later with it. And actually he's not going to run really until this fall when he gets put on a auger cart. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens, but I think it's going to be just fine. Me and Joseph's going to switch gears and get back on the S670. We're currently halfway through a rotor bearing right now. We got the rotor bearing off and man, did it fight us. So we're going to continue with that. Stay tuned. There will be more content on the 6125R. I promise I will film that entire project in its entirety. But I have so many projects going on right now between the field and the shop and the way my schedule is. We're kind of going to be bouncing around on different projects throughout the next few videos. So the next thing we got to do once we get this combine done is we got to go look at a 9870 that's got a bunch of oil in the coolant. My favorite. So I might video some of that for you guys, but I will get back on the 6R and we will get that MFWD back together and we're going to start it and just see what happens to the pressures after we fix the MFWD. Let's see what our system pressures and lube pressures are and go from there. If our system pressure is still too low, then we're going to put a cab tilting device on the rear of the tractor. And we're going to tilt the cab all the way over to the side to where we can get access to the front of the transmission and go in after that transmission pump. So stay tuned. I appreciate you guys watching. Hit the like button, Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Comment below. Let me know how I'm doing. And until next time, keep that green iron moving.